Night fell over the monastery of Toledo, and the silence was so complete it seemed to breathe. In a narrow stone cell lit only by a candle stub, a man knelt on the floor, his robe torn, his hands bound. The walls were damp, the air cold, but his face was serene. His name was Juan de la Cruz, John of the Cross, and though the world would one day call him a saint, at that moment he was a prisoner of his own brothers. He had been captured for following a vision too pure for the comfortable. Reform had made him an enemy. Love had made him free. Yet even in chains, his eyes saw light. "Where are you?" he whispered into the darkness. "Why do you hide?" There was no answer, only the slow drip of water in the corner, the shuffle of rats. But in that silence, something moved. Not sound, but presence. It was here, in the blackest night of his life, that John began to see what others never would. That God is not found only in light, but in the darkness that purifies the soul. He had once been a dreamer, a boy from Fontiveros, who gazed at the stars and felt eternity pressing close. The poverty of his childhood taught him how fragile life was, yet it also taught him wonder. All things, he would later write, speak of God, and the soul that listens hears his whisper. He joined the Carmelites not out of duty, but out of love. His calling was not to comfort, but to transformation. When he met Teresa of Avila, the great reformer, she saw at once the same fire in him that burned in her. Together, they envisioned a return to simplicity, poverty, and prayer. A Carmelite life stripped of luxury, made entirely of longing. But such purity frightened the complacent. His brothers called him fanatic. When he refused to yield, they imprisoned him in a tiny cell, no bigger than a coffin, with no light, no bed, and only bread and water. He nearly died there, but it was there, in the dark, that his poetry began. He had no paper, no ink, only his soul and the infinite. He began to compose verses in his mind, weaving pain into beauty, turning night into prayer. In the dark night of the soul, he would write later, I found love that burned brighter than 1,000 suns. He realized that darkness was not the absence of God, but the veil through which he is seen. To come to the knowledge you have not, you must go by a way in which you know not. This was the paradox that shaped his life. To lose all things is to find the one thing. When at last he escaped, he carried with him no bitterness, only the vision of a God who hides himself to draw the soul closer. He returned to Teresa and continued the reform with renewed peace. His body was frail, but his words became rivers of light. He wrote The Ascent of Mount Carmel, The Spiritual Canticle, and The Living Flame of Love, works that would become the heart of Christian mysticism. For him, the journey of faith was not the ascent of ambition, but the descent into surrender. In order to be everything, he said, desire to be nothing. His students often found him in the chapel long before dawn, his face uplifted, lips moving without sound. When asked what he prayed, he smiled gently. I pray to become the silence where God speaks. His poetry became his theology, and his theology, his song. O night more lovely than the dawn, he wrote. O night that joined the lover with his beloved. He saw love as the only path to knowledge. The intellect bowed before the flame of the heart. To him, God was not an idea to be defined, but a fire to be entered. If you wish to be sure of the road you tread, he told his novices, close your eyes and walk in the dark. The years passed, and the flame within him only grew brighter, even as his body weakened. Wherever he went, people spoke of the light that seemed to move with him. Not a light seen by the eyes, but one that made hearts still. He walked through towns in silence, blessing those who cursed him, embracing those who feared him. "I have no enemies," he said once. "Only souls I have not yet loved enough." His writings deepened into the language of union, words that seemed less written than breathed from another realm. In the dark night of the soul, he described the journey not as despair, but as purification. The soul stripped of all attachments, entering a darkness so complete that it is filled only with God. "It is in this night," he wrote, "that the soul, guided by love, comes to the secret place where the beloved rests." For John, this was not metaphor. He lived it. When pain visited, he did not resist. When joy came, he did not cling. He moved like one already belonging to heaven, a man who had walked through the fire and found that it was love itself. He often taught in whispers, his voice soft as the wind. "Do not seek to feel God," he told his brothers. "Seek to love him. Feelings are the smoke. Love is the fire." To him, faith was not certainty but surrender, a blind trust that the darkness was not the absence of light, but its beginning. He wrote of the living flame of love that consumes the soul, not to destroy it, but to make it what it truly is. Fire from fire. "O living flame of love," he prayed, tenderly wound my soul in its deepest center. "Burn that I may become wholly yours." Those who read his words could feel their own hearts trembling, as if that same flame had touched them. When illness came, he accepted it as a final teacher. His nights grew long, his breathing shallow, but his peace unbroken. A brother once found him gazing out the window at the stars, tears glistening in his eyes. "Why do you weep, Father?" he asked. John smiled faintly. "Because love is so great, and we understand so little." In his final days, his room was filled with a gentle radiance, the same golden darkness he had once known in prison. He asked for Psalm 23 to be read aloud. As the words, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," were spoken, he whispered, "Ah, but the valley is full of light." Then he closed his eyes, and his face became still, as though listening. Those who were there said the air itself grew fragrant, and a strange hush fell over the monastery. Not grief, but wonder. He was only 49 when he died, but his spirit became a bridge between heaven and earth. Centuries later, his poetry would still be read by those who wander in darkness. Seekers, mystics, broken hearts searching for light. His legacy was not doctrine or discipline, but presence, the knowing that even in the most desolate night, love waits. In the film's closing scene, the camera would follow a single candle burning in a stone cell. The wind flickers it, but it does not die. The flame steadies, grows, fills the walls with golden light. John's voice, calm and tender, echoes through the silence. When the night is darkest, the dawn is nearest. To come to love, we must walk through the dark. The candle's light expands until it fills the screen, gold fading into white, darkness into dawn. And for a moment, the viewer feels what John felt, the night itself transformed into love.